we've got a look at the aftermath and how to assess hail damage. Plus, a huge development in Gothenburg, a sustainable fertilizer plant that holds big-time potential. Later, how scientists are charting a flight path for the future of aviation, and sorghum may be the key. It's time to grow. Zero carbon ammonia. Nebraska innovates the future of fertilizer. Good evening and welcome to Grow. More on that in a moment, but we start with those storms that took a beating on crops, and NTV's Gary Robinson Jr. has a look at the aftermath.
I spoke with a local farmer today who told me about the devastating winds that came through this morning. But what he says is worst of all is the hail that came through and shredded his crops. These crops were once 14 inches tall. Now,
3 inches tall. Our alfalfa across the road here, it was ready to cut. It's 3 inches tall. The hail just mowed it to the ground.
Lyle Martin farms and owns much of this land and says,
And it's all totally destroyed.
On top of that, his 4-year-old barn took a hit with pieces of sheet metal spread throughout the field. But Martin states that he isn't the only one who was affected.
That little twister went down through, tore the power lines down. A mile west of here, they're all on the ground.
We reached out to an Ag Valley co-op who said that not much will be harvested and farmers will be significantly impacted. Wheat harvesting season is here, but this storm could have not come at a worse time.
I had irrigated wheat on top of the hill. We were going to cut wheat today.
After the storm has moved out, Martin and his family are going to use their other resources and continue to do what they do best.
We've got a lot of beans. We're going to go replant beans and replant milo where the corn was and see if we can get a crop for this fall. And we just go from there. Day by day, that's about all we can do.
In Orleans, for NTV News, I'm Gary Robinson Jr.
Storm also pounded the town of Wilsonville and the farmland around it. Not only did corn, soybeans, and wheat fields take a beating, with a large percentage likely unable to rebound this year. A number of pivots are now on their side, some of which were even twisted by the wind and hail. Those storms causing the Southwest Public Power District to ask people in northern Hitchcock and Dundee counties to conserve energy. They say they lost 45 poles in the storm. The deputy emergency manager for Dundee County says they lined both sides of Highway 61, 15 miles north of Binkleman. The power district says they're shifting electricity loads while they repair transmission structures. They're asking irrigators to shut off pivots for a couple of days. The deputy emergency manager says overturned pivots were reported in the area. Promoting sustainable agriculture. That's the driving force behind a new fertilizer plant in Gothenburg, an investment of more than $700 million. NTV's Taylor Leverett was at the groundbreaking and has more.
Sustainability.
It's good for the planet and it's good for business.
The American Farm Bureau says most fertilizer production comes from out of the state, but now
we're going to have it right here, produced right here in Gothenburg, Nebraska, and for the whole state.
The Gothenburg Improvement Company and the city of Gothenburg spearheaded the $705 million project. Out of the investment will come an electrolyzer-based liquid fertilizer facility that'll use carbon-free energy resources.
That's a really big piece. All of us in agriculture want to be able to fertilize our crops without fossil fuels.
And just how will it work? Electrolysis, or splitting water into hydrogen and oxygen gas, and then taking nitrogen from the atmosphere to make byproducts that'll be used as fertilizer for crops like corn. Supporting the electricity of the project is the Central Nebraska Public Power and Irrigation District and Dawson Public Power District.
It was born out of the farmer.
Plans for the project, Joshua says, was over a span of 6 years.
And looking at the challenges of the farmer who are faced with many.
The new facility is hoping to offer relief in a product that many Nebraska farmers will benefit from.
Soon the world's going to find out this is the best place in the world to do business, and we're just getting started.
Reporting in Gothenburg, I'm Taylor Leverett.
Earlier, we talked about those suffering the effects of storms. Others haven't seen nearly enough rainfall, and that drought is causing a lot of problems.
Right now, Mother Nature has not been cooperating very well.
Most of Nebraska's corn comes from here in eastern Nebraska, and this year we've seen far less rain than usual. Dryland farmers are starting to account for major yield losses, while irrigation farmers are barely keeping up by watering constantly.
Most of the dryland corn and the pivot corners, by the end of this week, there's going to be very little harvested come this fall, if any. It's pretty bad.
Both exceptional drought and little to no subsoil moisture from winter's precipitation has put us in a position worse off than 2012.
12, we had some subsoil profile. We had some moisture going into the spring. This year we started with very little to almost non-existent. We did burn up pretty bad in 12. We had some pretty low yields, but right now we're looking at where we may not even have anything on some of the dry land. So it's already worse.
In a better year, Nerid will see 150 to 200 bushels per acre. But realistically right now, he says much of his dry land will be zeroed out or very few bushels, if any.
Crop insurance agents and adjusters are coming out and starting to look at the dryland corners and some of the dryland fields. At some point, they will essentially write off those acres because it won't pay to drive a combine through there and try and harvest little or nothing that will be in the corn.
Crop insurance will offset some of the costs, but with increased prices for fertilizer, seed, and land costs, it will not offset everything, leaving farmers at a loss. Livestock are being affected because of pastures not growing and the low hay yields. Normally, Nerid has about 200 to 225 big round bales, but right now he has about 10.
We started pulling cattle out of the pasture, and we're actually going to sell my spring and fall herds next month, just for the fact that we don't have the pasture hay for them.
And while experts say it's hard to know now, we may see the effects of this ripple down to the grocery stores eventually.
It's very hard to say. The one thing on the livestock end, in this area, there is a dramatic reduction in the amount of cow numbers they're going to slaughter because the guys could definitely see an increase in beef price. That I could see, unfortunately.
Expanding rural broadband internet access critical to Nebraska. NTV's Taylor Leverett reports.
In today's digital world, connecting to the internet is not even a second thought for many. But across the state, the Institute of Education Services says over 30,000 Nebraskans ages 5 to 19 don't have broadband internet at home. For Elm Creek Village Administrator Dusty Newton, this became quite apparent for his community during those pandemic days.
Definitely one of the things it showed us was the lack of connectivity for a lot of students when they were home.
Now Help to Connect Online is on the way. A bipartisan bill announced over $405 million in broadband funding will be heading to Nebraska communities. The money is part of funds set aside from the Biden-Harris administration high-speed internet grant program. Newton says small communities like Elm Creek would benefit greatly. And as agriculture drives the state's workforce, companies like AgDryer say they'd also gain from the expanded broadband support.
We can really get out and market our products a lot better than what we would be able to just in the small town of Elm Creek.
There are no updates as of yet to how the government funds will be divided among communities in the state, but Newton says once it comes in, first up on his agenda would be stronger broadband connectivity in the classroom.
Schools, the school ought to be in a front row seat, in my opinion, when it comes to that connectivity, because that's the heart of the community.
Later, how sorghum plants could be the fuel factory for the aviation industry. Up next, we talk with Nebraska Extension's hail expert about assessing damage after the storms.
This portion of NTV's Grow is sponsored by Acres Equipment, solutions for every field. Acres has what you need to get the job done.
Some Nebraska farmers see the fruits of their labor gone in an instant as those hailstorms rolled through. We talked with Nebraska Extension about how to assess the damage.
All do. So it's not a wonderful outcome for every field. Some really have been hit hard enough. It's the end of the road for it. But, growers are, across their operation making a list of those that are hit. and then, making that plan to assess. If it got an insurance agent, making a call to that insurance agent saying, hey, I got some hail damaged fields. And then next thing is go to the lake, go somewhere else. Don't go to that field till at least, 4 to 6 is the lowest. I think that 7 to 10 is a better estimation that growers will start to see a response from that crop.
Let's maybe start on the soybean side. What's kind of the outlook for somebody who's maybe taking some hail damage right about now?
But we want to know the crop is regrowing. So a hailstone hits low, really damages that vascular tissue. We may have nodes connected, but they're not able to move nutrients through that plant efficiently anymore. And so that 7 to 10 days is really going to tell us, do we have a viable plant out there?
You've even done some kind of time lapse type stuff to see how a crop recovers, haven't you?
Yeah, we've done a lot. Both corn and soybeans, both crops are really neat in their response. Soybeans will initiate those nodes below and sometimes produce like a goalpost type plant, which means they're doubling their node count because there's 2 nodes forming every 3.7 days throughout the rest of the season, or at least till R5. So there's, I guess, to give growers some hope, there's some time right now for those soybeans to do something. If we were sitting, later in the season and this happened, this would be kind of no replant potential. Replants are pretty late right now, but still a potential. But we'd be out of a lot of windows for having those plants recover anything that was left out there.
And more specifically on corn, what would you kind of say to somebody as kind of looking maybe at some damage to some corn then?
Yeah, we're again into that defoliation, really more complex assessment that you definitely need to wait. So anybody who's seen photos show up on Twitter of hail damaged fields notices a whole bunch of shredded leaves, right? Growers could be V10 through V12. Have a lot of leaves out. I think V10, about 50% of the leaves are out on corn. So you shredded a bunch of leaves and they're kind of hanging down that plant. And the question is, how many of those still can gather light and use it for energy on the plant? How do we know that? We wait 7 to 10 and we see if the tissue, tattered or not, is still green. Now, if it's still green, it's still functioning. If it turns brown, we lost it, in which case it becomes part of that defoliation loss. The tables for loss on defoliation in corn really surprise people. 25% or so defoliations. Yes, it causes some crop loss, not as much as what people might think. Again, if like soybeans, if we were having this conversation and your corn is tasseled, tasseling's the worst time to get hail. That's the highest potential losses we're going to see. But the big jumps for growers to consider is from that 25 to 50% defoliation, and then 50 to 75 and 100. That range and gap is where the losses really come up. And I could tell you a drive-by looks a lot higher than it actually is in the field. So these are not things you drive by and go, that looks like 50. You got to go out and really look. And adjusters are trained to do that assessment. It's hard.
There's some great webinars online. If people really want to dig deep into this, they can learn more. And of course, contacting your local extension office never hurts either.
Yep. Yeah. And a lot of what I talked about today is right on Hail No, which is part of that whole UNL Crop Watch and UNL system. That's your one-stop shop to walk through the process. There's nice graphics in there that's, I got a hailstorm, step 1, step 2, step 3. So it's an emotional time. You want easy guidance. Those are nice references to take with you.
Our Grow Weather Outlook is next.
NTV's Grow Weather is sponsored by Acres Equipment, solutions for every field. Acres has what you need to get the job done.
There's improvement in parts of the drought, but still a lot of disapproval in the drought overall, especially in Kansas. 2.28% of Kansas drought-free. That is down from last week. 97.75% abnormally dry in the Sunflower State. In the moderate drought, 85%. 61% severe, extreme 37.5%, exceptional 7.5%. Nebraska, on the other hand, has gained ground up in the Panhandle, northwest Nebraska. 11% of the state in that area drought-free, even a slice through and over by Scotts Bluff. Abnormally dry, 89% in Nebraska, 75% moderate, severe, 53% extreme at 26%, and exceptional up this week to 13.15%. We need to get rid of the exceptional part of that drought, and we'll see if it's in the cards with all the rain we saw late last week and over the weekend, if that will make an impact in this week's drought monitor. July, temperature-wise, above normal, all of Kansas, most of Nebraska except the northwest corner, normal. Precip-wise, above normal, northern Nebraska, northeast Nebraska, otherwise normal for the rest of the state and all of Kansas. The 3-month outlook then, July, August, September, normal temperatures for all of Nebraska except the southeast corner, and normal in the northern portions of Kansas, otherwise the rest of Kansas will see temperatures averaging in the 3-month period above normal. Above normal, precip-wise, almost all of Nebraska and Kansas, and of course, that is good news. Does it mean we will finally dig out of the drought? Well, the heat pours in for our 4th of July celebration, especially then. A pretty significant cold front means a significant cool down. That means highs 78 Thursday, 75 Friday, and we still have those chances of rain continuing, of course, thunderstorms. Normal highs 88 this time of year, normal lows 64. We will average in the week ahead 83 for a high, 61 the low. With the rain we've had of late, have you noticed the mushrooms? They spring up during the night. If so, expect rain. Mushrooms and toadstools are numerous before the rain. That is your Grow Report for this week. Join us again next time when, once again, it will be time to grow.
Whether you're side dressing a little nitrogen, working with cattle, or whatever you're doing this time of year, we want to see your pictures. Go to our website, Nebraska.tv, and chime in. Corn is king. Now Husker scientists work to unlock potential in another crop, turning it to jet fuel. The flight plan for a more sustainable future in aviation could begin in the Nebraska farm fields. To achieve the view from 40,000 feet, Tom Clementi wants you to start at the roots.
Genetic variation in the sorghum plant such that the stalks
turning a sorghum plant into a fuel factory.
Accumulate oil in the leaves and stems of the plant rather than in the seeds.
Re-engineering sorghum to produce more oil, the vegetable kind to replace the petroleum kind.
Our goal is really to develop technologies that can benefit farmers and benefit the rural bioeconomy. We hope that someday this high oil sorghum can be processed in a rural location that will create great jobs for our citizens of Nebraska.
Work at the University of Nebraska has shown promise as they continue to make improvements. But researchers say it's the stuff science can't control that may be the biggest hurdle.
We'd have to build, the places to process this and then be able to feed it to a renewable diesel facility. So all the infrastructure has to be in place.
These scientists receive millions in federal funds as they work with colleagues across the country to achieve a goal of net zero aviation, while also giving farmers a crop that could be grown on marginal ground.
I think it would be a game changer, I think.
Ed Cahoon and Tom Clemente say it's that twin engine of agriculture and the environment that powers this flight.
We can create jobs in rural America and not displace soybean and corn production that's more on high value soil, and we can go in more marginal lands to produce this commodity.
Some really cool work going on there. Well, not sorghum behind me, but corn. What else would you expect? This corn at Sturm Museum, they're going to be hosting the hand corn husking competition this fall. So put that on your calendar. You're definitely going to want to check that out. Well, we wish you the best on this Independence Day weekend, and we'll see you back here next time as we see how agriculture makes Nebraska grow.
NTV's Grow is brought to you by Aurora Cooperative. Tougher together, Aurora and you.